today's little info snippet is going to be around secure remote access for OT environments. I am from Datacentrix. I manage the industrial practice. We work with Cyolo, which really gives us the technical capability to enable customers to remotely and securely get to their OT infrastructure. If you want to reach me on LinkedIn, read some of the articles I've written on the space. My details are on the bottom. If you need to reach out to me, please DM me and we'll take it from there. All right, let's get the party started. So what is it that Datacentrix does? Our OT practice is built around 3 pillars: visibility, zero trust, and automation. When we go to customers, normally they are on a journey to segregate their IT and the OT environment, but fundamentally, a lot of the customers are still looking to see what type of assets they've got on their different OT zones. So we provision managed services or technology towards this problem, and really allows you to get full asset inventory, allows you to look at your security posture and your risk in that area. And we also provision the service not just on the factory floor, but also surrounding the factory. You've got access control, building management, CCTV, smart tools, drills, scanners, all types of devices that normally are not on your IT pen test and not on your OT red teaming exercises. So really catering for all of that. Our customers also ask us to do ESG reporting. So we put electrical metering technology down, LV panel, HV panel, municipal layer, building layer, and we plug that into an ESG platform where we do greenhouse reporting. Very pertinent because in South Africa, our carbon liability tax is going live the 31st of December at almost double the rate it is currently. So a lot of value to be had there. Once we've given the customer the full visibility spectrum, then we go into the zero trust architecture, fundamentally led by secure remote access, how to get into a customer environment by doing overlaying two-factor authentication, session recording, session joining, and also session denial or approval based on approval levels. So remote access, modernizing that jump server is really fundamental to making sure customers are secure. We've seen that big OEMs have been hacked before, and their customer user credentials have been made available on the dark web. So we have to take that trust and internalize it to make sure if we work with external supply chain or partners or contractors that we protect ourselves from within. We can't rely on someone else anymore. We also then do shop floor IPS, IDS, and EDR, very specific technology aimed at securing that process network. We have some SOC offering. We do virtual patching where there's no patching options. And we also have the capability to do remote firmware and firmware management and password rotation. And then the final component, once we've taken the customer through a journey of visibility and zero trust, we start looking at how to modernize and protect and replicate his historian. How do we take his PLC estate and virtualize that engineering workstation into a browser-based interface, and then also doing PLC change management, code backup, and AI auto documentation on that PLC instruction set. The value that we bring to this party is that the technology works across multiple brands of PLCs. So even though there might be a tool sitting with Siemens or Rockwell that can already do backup, or maybe do change management on the code, this really gives you the capability to work across most of the vendors that you've got. We also then have some very interesting technology from an AR and a VR perspective, where we can do production level training for people to do vehicle assembly or mine maintenance. And then so the specialist can do, or the on-site engineer can do 70% of the work, and the specialist can dial in and do that last 30%. Really big cost saving attached to that. And then the final thing that we do is condition monitoring, putting down thermal cameras, looking at robots, looking at crushers, feeders, conveyor systems, and then using thermal over temperature to report back into the maintenance team to say that this specific piece of equipment needs to be maintained or serviced before it actually has a breakdown. So that's fundamentally what we do from a Datacentrix perspective. When we look at some of the industry trends and some of the common challenges, our customers are digitizing, right? They've got their existing PLC estate, but they're bringing industrial IoT, they're bringing in IoT, LoRaWAN, Zigbee, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, fiber, a whole conglomerate of digital services that's overlaid into this production environment for condition monitoring and for performance optimization, and obviously to make a tangible difference in profit. We also then see that cloud infrastructure plays a very big part of this. When you do your condition monitoring and you've got access to cloud services, then you can get telemetry across many more machines, and you would crunch that numbers from an AI perspective on-prem. Workforce is also changing dramatically. In the olden days, all of the work needed to be done on site. After COVID, we've seen that remote work, works pretty well. But really, even the younger workforce doesn't want to get their nails dirty. They don't want to get into dangerous environments. They really want to be able to have that access to do work remotely. And then the final component is third-party access. If you run a very complex gas, a processing plant, or maybe even food and bev, or in the manufacturing space, you've got different suppliers, contractors, and OEMs that all support you, that need access to the shop floor, right? So it's really managing that third-party risks. And then, so what are some of the common challenges, right? For an engineer to get to a specific OT asset, sometimes they need to get into a VPN, from the VPN to the jump server, from the jump server to the engineering workstation, from the engineering workstation, the SSH into the PLC. So there could be multiple layers of logins. And this is not even talking about like the TIA portal, or this is just to get to that specific PC. And then also engineers lose time when they have to do emergency work, but they have to fly somewhere to do it. And then, it's doing creative workarounds, through Hotspot or Zoom, while many people are engaging this specific problem, but one person has remote access. That's really something that could help a problem be resolved much quicker. And then there's also disconnected layers of internal, external access tools and policies, right? You might have network access control, Fortinet on the OT side, but then you've got something else on the IT side. And as contractors traverse your IT, your DMZ, your IT network, and then your OT network, there's a discrepancy between policy and enforcement across the way. So, what are some of the business needs, the core business needs? Third parties need access to the factory floor. Engineers need access to the factory environment, but also contractors need access to the physical facility, and they all need access to very sensitive data. And then some of the risks are is leakage of private information. As you use this jump server mechanism and you copy data from, one RDP session to another RDP session, there's some fundamental risks attached to that. And there's a big chance of shutting down the manufacturing line if you don't have this remote access done in an audited fashion, where you can do training, enablement, and there's full visibility in regards to the PLC code that you change, or the changes that you make on the HMI or on the engineering workstation. And that brings reputational damage and loss of income, and worst case scenario, safety risk. And then malware obviously is a ever looming threat in the production area. And then, some of the unique characteristics in this landscape, really, talks around safety is always key. There's legacy systems. OT relies heavily on third-party support. There's some customers very early in the digitization process, and there's extensive regulation, from a TISAX or a NERC CIP or a NIST perspective. And I think that's fundamentally some challenges that we need to get around. Then from sorry about that. Then, from a customer perspective, there's a big manufacturer that we had that had some challenges in regards to remote access to rugged environments, like in the shipping container space. They were unable to provision assets with a fixed IP for multiple policies. And, they had a very big concern around safety when operators actually worked on the equipment. So after installing the remote access capability for this customer, it really gave them an improvement in remote access, ease of use, and much better security profiling on that environment. And, they also had the capability to deploy their agents to a very rugged environment, which is very small, container based. Now, this is quite interesting because now you've got switches, and you've got routers, and you've got industrial PCs, and you've got so many, even engineering workstations, where you can create container run space, to probably get around some of the compatibility issues from a Windows perspective, but really gives you the capability to move your remote access very, very close to the specific OT asset that you need. And it gave the customer the ability to freely attach multiple policies across any user space that connects to that specific area. And then, so this is from a manufacturing perspective. When it comes to OEMs, that was even a better value proposition. The OEM, the factory, or the machine manufacturer, needed to scale approximately 1,000 big machines and sites around like 2,500 sites, and they needed the ability to bundle access solution with their own service components, to have a complete OEM solution. So that means they would have a managed service or software stack that would communicate to the robots or that MES estate, but the connectivity, they wanted to bundle in the connectivity and the remote access into that offering. Once we've implemented this technology, the customer had a unique multi-tenanted architecture which allows them to operate these machines at customer sites with full access while having a much better security posture for that specific customer. It was fast, it was simple, scalable, and really gives you the capability to connect to hundreds of machines worldwide in a very quick fashion. Also had the flexibility to adapt to the changing requirements as the customer use cases changed, and to be able to fit your remote access policy across any type of factory infrastructure. Now, normally customers ask me, what does this look like? If you want to implement this remote access technology, I'm used to having my jump server, I'm used to having my DMZ, I'm used to having it run in a certain way. How disruptive is this and what does it look like? So firstly, the architecture is built around a private gateway and what they call an identity access controller. The private gateway would normally sit in your DMZ. There's a port 443 that would talk out to your MFA tool, to Active Directory. Maybe even if you've got a password vaulting or rotation tool, then an external one, then it would access that at level 5. The private gateway has all of these functions built into it, so you don't really need it if you buy Cyolo, but it's built in. But the private gateway normally sits at your DMZ from a safety perspective, and then your IDAC or your identity access controller sits in that process control or that OT zone. And that really connects to your HMIs and your historian, and even your PLC and your engineering workstation. And then, so there's just from the IDAC, normally customers would have one private gateway duplicated for redundancy, and then they would have multiple IDACs in all of their OT zones. So that's the IDAC is the one that gets duplicated as you have specific conduits or zones that you've created from a 62443 perspective. And really, it just punches a 443 hole between the IDAC and the gateway, and that makes it quite simple from a firewall perspective. So even if you've got a third party managing the firewall, or it's an OT firewall, or it's an IT firewall, it really makes it a lot easier for you to manage that risk. If you then have an internal operator that needs to access the system, they would access the system through a web browser. They would log in. That login is either done through a Active Directory integration, or we create users directly on the gateway, however you want it. But it would then give him two-factor authentication where he actually needs to access the device. The gateway will route him to the IDAC. The IDAC will then absorb the username and password. So you can either create the username and password for this contractor on the IDAC, and then so that the credentials of the actual PLC or the robot is then extracted or removed away from the operator, so that only direct access to the device uses the original credentials, but anything that comes through IDAC is either virtualized or rotated or whatever the case might be. This is really important because if we look at the next slide, when it comes to third-party operators that access the system, they always like to do admin, user one, contractor one, whatever the case might be. But if that third-party contractor gets exploited, Cyolo has some AI built into it where it can actually see if this third-party operator always dials in from the UK, but all of a sudden they dial in from China, or they always access PLC 1, but now they're trying to do, block changes on PLC 2, the internal operator gets notified of that. When this third-party operator tries to connect to one of these specific assets, the internal operator can also be used as a verification mechanism. So on his cell phone, he would get a pop-up that says, this contractor is trying to access this device. Do you approve? Yes or no? You can approve. If you're not available, it goes to a second approver, third approver, fourth approver. So there's no, bottleneck in this. We also sell this offering as a managed service. So we always have someone available during these change processes to make sure that there's someone can immediately create a new password or make any changes, but that normally doesn't happen. You also then have the capability to join that specific session. So you can now join that session and see what this operator does. If you're happy with it, then you can leave it. But the IDAC also does all of the session recordings. So as this operator moves in and he accesses the robot, everything that he does in his SSH panel or his HTTP screen or whatever the protocol is that speaks to these devices, that gets recorded. And we can use that then for training purposes. So we can take the third-party operator changes and then train the internal operators. And after 12 months, we can take all of those recordings and do a contract analysis. So if the third-party contractor is supposed to do a health check once a week or whatever the case might be, we can see if those things don't happen, and if it happens, how it happens, which makes this a very interesting tool for you to manage your business contractors, SLAs. When it comes to protocols, I have to move my camera around, but if you access through the web-based client, it supports SSH, RDP, VNC, HTTP, HTTPS, SMB, Telnet. When you use native clientless access, it's got SSH and RDP, and then it also gives you the capability to do dynamic tunnel clientless, and the Cyolo Connect client is also available. If you are a observer, so we spoke about the engineer or manager that's observing the session, then for the web-based client gives you access via SSH, RDP, VNC, Telnet, the native client through SSH. If you're doing session recording, same thing. The web-based client gives you SSH, RDP, VNC, and Telnet. The native client supports SSH and RDP. A small note: SMB provides detailed logging, so recording might not be required. If we are vaulting credentials, which means we extract the credentials away from the OT asset, then we can do that through the web client using all of the protocols, or we can do it through the native client list process doing SSH and RDP. And that's a video. Thank you so much for your time. If you've got any questions, reach me on LinkedIn. If you want us to discuss how OT remote access can be beneficial to your organization, please reach out and we will do exactly that. Thank you so much. Have a good one.